Good afternoon, Abbotsford residents. I'm Mr. Pelican. Happy Easter. I'm running for Mayor of Abbotsford. The first thing I will do as your Mayor of Abbotsford, along with the community that was viciously attacked by Henry Braun, is bring the RCMP in. How many officers were under Henry's thumb and under Henry's control? Only God knows, not even me. That means we got to remove all the Abbotsford Police Task Force of what they took place. This should have never took place anywhere in Canada. It was done on greed. Today, ladies and gentlemen, is the advance polling. I want to assure you, to the seniors and everybody, get out and please vote today to the advance polling. Every vote will account. And not only that, we got to make sure that we got people in our MLAs and MPs office now that listen. And that will be your voice here in Abbotsford as well as in Ottawa. When Darren Braun, Henry's son, first told me what his dad was doing in the city and how many people were under his thumb, even I couldn't imagine and believe that. That means it was done by greed, by positioning, by rewards, by kickbacks. Henry Braun set up an elite establishment to own Abbotsford. These four men that are on the front of Abbotsford's Caprictor newspaper, Ed Fast, Mike DeYoung, Henry Braun, and George Perry. Darren Braun showed me when George Perry rented a helicopter and flew Henry everywhere around Abbotsford when he was the city council, showing him in the investments of how big and rich he was. The fight for the MP position to load Mike DeYoung, you could see this, is worse than the 1988 movie Mississippi Burning with Gene Hackman. You could see what's taking place. Abbotsford residents were not allowed to have a voice in your city, on Cooper's Farm, the Mackenzie Bog, or nothing. Henry Braun was the engine, and I made it clear, of controlling everything in Abbotsford, from city engineers to city planners to everything. Fast-tracking his jobs. He believed this town was his. But the imagination of what he did in the law enforcement police building is unbelievable. That is unbelievable. Using the Abbotsford Police Task Force when he went after Mogel so he could own the city and jack it. Henry Braun had these two politicians, Mike DeYoung and Ed Fast, the MLA of the Liberals and the MP of the Federal Conservatives, cleaning it for him. But he used the newspaper to shield it from all Abbotsford. When Darren Braun first spoke of this, of what he was doing, I went over to the RCMP knowing that Mike Sir was in over his head as the police chief, and he wasn't representing the body of law, and he was covering Henry's vicious acts. First of all, you know, having your own son in front of you, rushing your jobs in conflict of interest, and then having city council help you, the majority of them rush them jobs. Henry figured nobody would ever prove this. Henry's whole goal to load Mike DeYoung here in Abbotsford is to hold out investigations. You could see it. Nowhere in history have you seen such a slate. The evil empire has rose itself to think. I believe, in my opinion, the new police chief that's sitting here with his hands up his yin-yang, don't know which way to go after it's been bluntly put to him. He's distanced himself from Henry, Mike DeYoung, and that. And now you could see Henry not using the police to go after the Conservative candidate, Suk Mangel. So he's using Dave Sadu, which is the city council, what Mike DeYoung loaded, to try to split the vote. You could see Mike DeYoung using the blue colors as the Conservatives and everything else. We need law enforcement. We need to make sure that this never happens again. But these men took a uniform for sympathy, leniency, to cover, and to clean. The Abbotsford Task Force knew what they were doing when they sat on top of me. They just didn't know that it was going to go on the world stage to show. They used sympathy. They wanted private investigations. They made no effort. When Henry Braun got in his car and tried to end my life in broad daylight, it was the RCMP mission that stood beside us homeowners, and especially me, and made sure that Ed Fast was hauled out on it. Ed Fast showed his colors by using his MP office to cover for Henry Braun rather than speak in Ottawa. You could see them all. The question is now, to the federal government MPs and to the new leader that's going to come in as Prime Minister. How much did Ed Fast cover? How much did Ed own? And we got to go after forensic audits because we knew the Abbotsford police were covering it. You can't order the task force to sit in front of the... They just didn't do it to me. They did it to Mogel. Henry strict the South Asian community in Abbotsford from having on the police board or anything. He went after Councillor Mogel rigorously, and that was all to own the city. Make no mistake that Ross Siemens, when I ran for mayor, was thanks to the RCMP. They said, put your name forward, Mr. Pelican. I said, I'll design a campaign office. He won't know it's coming. And we'll see how much Henry owns the city. And we're going to see the acts that Henry has to initiate and the attacks on you to help Ross Siemens. They were front and center. Greg Tozer, the Chamber of Commerce, that was loyal to Henry, that sold land when he was a UFV to Ron Funkaddiverse out in Chilliwack. It showed Henry's whole team of what he was doing. When Greg Tozer tried to bribe me at the night of the city, and he would run me in 4 years, but first we load Ross Siemens. That was to help Henry. When Henry knew that he couldn't buy me, he couldn't buy Mogel, he couldn't buy Bruce Bamman, he couldn't buy these candidates or these people that fought for Abbotsford, he used Vicky Hopes in the Abbotsford newspaper to scandal. Now let's talk about Mike DeYoung. Abbotsford Police has showed me all Mike's illegal signs out on senior care homes on boulevards. I learned from the city yesterday, before closing, for this long holiday, the city of Abbotsford's not going to take its bylaws this long holiday weekend and take any of Mike's signs down because they're ordered by Henry. Remember what Gabriel, electoral officer, did. That way it'll help Mike with all the massive senior care homes that got to get out to voting and everything else. It's called leveraging. It's more advertising. That'll give him probably 8,000 votes illegally and criminally. We saw what the Chamber of Commerce, Alex Mitchell, did when she inducted Mike DeYoung, and she said she's behind him. We saw the Fraser Valley Indo Chamber of Commerce, that was behind Mike DeYoung with Marcus Dalvis. We saw Dave Sadu as the sitting council, he's behind Mike DeYoung. We saw Simon Gibson, he's behind it. I believe when Darren Braun told me that my dad controlled them, if my dad goes, they all go down. So I knew with the RCMP directly to put Henry on the world stage and watch him panic and use up his people that he had in positions and bring them forward to do the acts that he could control. And you saw that coming forward. He used the Abbotsford police. It's clear. You don't need an investigation of what has took place. And for the Abbotsford police to sit there and lock their doors and figure that their building, their name was going to save them. What has happened to the federal Conservative candidate here by the massive cheating is not only loading and frauding the federal election, it's clearly, you could clearly see Henry's push. Henry's push is basically, he told Ed Fast, I go, you're gonna go, you covered. So let's make it what brought this. Henry Braun, Ed Fast, and Mike DeYoung lobbied a job beneath our houses. It was a scam. He could get it from the federal and provincial and award it to the contractors and do kickbacks. Just like they took the 71 million, then he added another 10 million, and I knew that Ross and the council would sign on Abbotsford taxpayers that embezzlement out of Abbotsford. Henry used Ed Fast when the damage happened on our houses to shut his mouth, and he wouldn't call a press conference. Ed Fast approached me when I ran for mayor, and he said, I would help you run your mayorship, Mr. Pelican. I knew he was going to undermine me. Ed Fast used somebody off the EDA that he damaged them houses to get the information from the lawyers that were suing so Ed could look at it. Basically, Ed could take it to Henry Braun. Henry Braun has to and must go to jail. The election that's here in Abbotsford is unfair to the Liberal candidate, the NDP candidate, and the Conservative candidate. They're doing everything to jam him. What is that for? Henry Braun needs Mike DeYoung in to save that police building, that city, and forensic audits. I, along with Abbotsford residents, don't care about Mike DeYoung one way or another. He covered up using his chair what Henry was doing with his son, city council, and he went above and figured he was bigger than law. Once you cross these boundaries, you use the police. This has to be judged by the courts, and we have to go everybody because it was done by financial greed. I laid out clearly yesterday what he was doing with Ron Funkaddiverse, rushing them jobs. in City Council, which was Ross Siemens, Sandy Blue, and all these people, specially wording decisions over the general public. Henry is the massive engine. But let me explain this, ladies and gentlemen. The Abbotsford Police, Mike Sir, the police chief, knew that Henry's attempt on my life was to end my life. He came out in his Alexis car, left that city parking lot, came to the protest where we were standing up about the racism and Henry's damage to the house, and he knew Ed and Mike were going to be drawn in. He came in his car and he came straight at me to end my life. Hit me, spun me between my truck and trailer, then sped off. It was the Abbotsford's top, not the bottom, let's make that clear. The top of the police department that covered it. They covered it for Henry Braun not to charge him, so Henry Braun could sit in the city, load the rest of his term, load every job site and everything. As your mayor, I made it clear there's only one way to stop the brutal acts on Abbotsford residents, the fraud on taxpayers, the embezzlement on money, is to bring the RCMP in first of all. That's what we got to do. Now, residents, you could see clearly in the newspaper as the bailout is big. It's huge, it's huge, it's huge. You could see David Eby distanced to south. You could see Pierre Poilievre won't come to Abbotsford. When these leaders start distancing themselves, they know there's trouble on the horizon, and you could see that trouble. You can see the Abbotsford Police Chief, Watts, hasn't endorsed Mike DeYoung. You would figure Watts would be out here. I want Mike. Mike could cover it. You could see the whole Abbotsford Police. These were families. These were done on greed. This is what law enforcement, I respect what does it. But we on Easter have to say this. We owe the Mission RCMP men and women a tremendous thanks. They never looked away. They stood by us all the way. We can't not have the Abbotsford Police thinking that they're above the law and that all law enforcements walk together. They embezzled the 71 million knowing. Now they asked for cost overruns for another 10 million knowing that's fraud. They knew Henry's sights. They knew the hit and run. They've made no effort. They went in that little office, closed the doors, and tried to protect Big Daddy. Big Daddy was trying to run Abbotsford like J.R. Ewing from Dallas. We have to go after Henry Braun, and we go after them all. We cannot allow organized crime to take place. That seat in that city is to be respected and to govern like Bruce Banman did, and you could see it. Henry's pulling out all his stance on this one candidate. But not only that, Mike DeYoung has the financial institutions, which is Abbotsford's business community, which will be everybody in the business community voting. He has the Chamber of Commerce voting. He has his signs illegal. Gabriel and bylaw and the Abbotsford Police are supposed to enforce bylaw, not taking his signs. That's leveraging the advertising, and then they'll figure on Monday. That's to attack the senior care homes and the voters in the advanced polling. Henry Braun was the solid engine behind it. You see Henry Braun, how active he is now. He's massively active. He's active, really active. Look at him trying to support Mike DeYoung. Mike DeYoung was a liberal. We were in Mike DeYoung's riding when them houses went down. It was the RCMP said, go to Mike. Well, Mike started telling me to cut a deal with Henry Braun. He owns Abbotsford. That tipped the RCMP off that Mike DeYoung's going to clean for Henry Braun using his office. That is why I took to the world stage. But the Abbotsford Police knew the scope of law, these men that were in there. When Olenoff threatened me and said there was massive break-ins at Henry's house, the RCMP searched, there was none. He knew Olenoff was lying, and how long did Henry own him? How much organized crime did Olenoff clean up for Henry? How many favors did Olenoff do to get tickets off of Mike DeYoung or Ed Fast and everything? Henry was owning Abbotsford, like a horror movie. Now you can see the distance. The Abbotsford Police has set the distance. A couple of days ago, the Abbotsford Police tipped me off about Mike DeYoung's signs, and I said, you're bloody stupid police chief. You're supposed to call a press conference. They're illegal. You enforce bylaws. This shit happened because you guys didn't keep a professional distance and maintain the law and investigations. And then you were going to be rewarded to shut your mouth by stealing 71 million off the taxpayers and everything else. We can't fear uniform. We got to make uniform be respected, and we got to make uniform make that when you took an oath. Abbotsford residents and me stand on the world's largest stage to thank the RCMP. But I am going to tell you, I am going to shit kick the hell out of the Abbotsford police because these were families. I'm going to make every law enforcement see these disgusting, filthy men that smashed cameras, smashed phones, and did everything, but covered an attempted murder for the elite mob boss of Abbotsford. Now, to the chief, you could see David Eby pulled out of the flood money. You could see the federal government pulled out of the flood money. You could see everybody. And you could see Big Henry trying to bully him in. Henry figures if he gets Mike DeYoung in, he'll get Mike over, they'll get him over into the Conservatives. Ed Fast will use his friends. You could see the unraveling of Brad Viss. Brad Viss is not supposed to stand by and allow the Conservative candidate to be targeted or that. Even the Abbotsford police, as much as heinous acts they did, they tried to do, some of them tried to do it as we're defending our building in the name. I understand that, but you don't use violence and you don't use this thing. You use proper scopes of law and you use lawyers. What Brad Viss has done, and it's clear to the Conservative candidate, is the discrimination through all Abbotsford, what has took place, like the movie, the 1988 movie, Mississippi Burning, the discrimination of what Henry was doing. Henry wanted this town. And then Henry figured the most vital thing was he was going to load Ross Siemens. Nobody would ever approve it. Nobody could ever prove it. Nobody would ever imagine that this thing could take place till Darren Braun came along. Then it was provable. Then it was all the evidence was trackable and followed. Henry Braun has to, ladies and gentlemen, and must go under financial audits with Ed Fast and Mike DeJong. And Henry Braun has to go to jail for his hit and run. But then Henry Braun has to look at how he paid Mike Suroff and investigators, how he used the task force to ring my house, how he used the Abbotsford police to come after me in front of my job sites and that. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand on the world stage because of the RCMP. Made sure that all this leverage is locked in. I don't want to hear shit out of these men's names. I know what Vicky Hopes of the newspaper can do because Darren Braun showed me and how she could leverage sympathy. Abbotsford residents need to know that when somebody commits a heinous act and is frauding, they can walk into the police and then police will be there for them and not worried about retaliation and targets. This company wasn't. They're a bunch of losers. When you're this far into this much, you got to think how much organized crime you're running, how much drug money you were stealing to take to Henry. The whole thing. Henry could hold the shots. So now they tried to distance themselves. The Liberals, the NDP, and the Conservatives know that Mike DeYoung has cheated beyond what the election even allows you, and how the establishment loaded him with the chamber and everybody. These were Henry's elite friends that Henry figured up on his farm on Downs that nobody would be there. It was Darren Braun that took pictures and gave them out, that there's the councillors that are whizzing the decisions for Ron Funkaddiverse. And Darren Braun then leaked Henry's partners and how Henry was fast-tracking all them jobs. And an elite investigator, I would have been better to have been sworn in as an RCMP officer. For an elite investigator to look away from the fraud, the embezzlement, and the racketeering is wrong. That is why private police cannot be trusted. We need the RCMP, and I will push till the day I die for the RCMP to take over Abbotsford. That is why I took to the world stage, asking for your votes, asking for your trust. The stuff that I went through with Abbotsford residents had great people beside me and still stand beside me today to call it out. These men were after money. Henry Braun, and you can see how active he is. So happy Easter, ladies and gentlemen. And today, get out and vote. Mike DeYoung is working at his office, I understand, today, and he's phoning everybody from the election list. Please, this is Mike, get me in. Fed Elections Canada, there's more than enough to strip Mike DeYoung and go after him for what he did with Alex Mitchell, the Chamber of Commerce, the newspaper, and all his signs and everything else. I know how much that benefits you by putting your signs all out illegal. You know Gabriel was under Henry's command. You know Magna was under Henry's command when the Cooper's Farm problem. You could see the Mackenzie bog, and people got deadly sick. And Magna was told through Ross, through everybody, not to do this. But the amazing thing is, as big as asshole I am, Ross's dad came to me. Ross Siemens' dad came to me because he saw right through it and he knew he was going to get caught. If Ross's dad seen through it, this is why Henry's wife said to Henry, "What the fuck did you do, Henry? What the fuck did you do now?" Then you know Ross's wife's knows, and you know everybody's wife's know. Henry Braun lost control, and he thought he was this rich, elite, big wig that nobody could say no to him, and everything was in his town. So I'm asking, why is not Watts standing here with Henry Braun, the four leaders, doing a press conference for Mike DeJong? He had to distance himself to save his company and his own skin, but he still hasn't done right. Affidavits, sworn statements, running stuff for the prosecution. This is not a resident's job. When I took this job to do what they were supposed to do, I want them gone. I want to take them tax dollars back into you, lower your taxes, and go after everything there is. For that to happen, ladies and gentlemen, I need the RCMP. And I need to come Commander-in-Chief. And I guarantee you, this will take place immediately. The RCMP will swarm Abbotsford like you've never seen. It'll look like an FBI raid. I'm live, Abbotsford, British Columbia.